Traffic study was the majority of it.
I'm going to call the February 17th, 2022 meeting of the Farragut Planning Commission to order. We'll start with the approval of the agenda.
There's 3 items that we're requesting for postponement this evening, items 5, 6, and 10.
To approve with the amendments.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Moving on to the approval of the minutes for the January 20th, 2022 meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item number 3 is a request for approval for a variance from the distance between driveway requirements for Collector Street, as provided for in the driveway and other access ways ordinance, for proposed single-family residence access at 408 Heron Road. Tester and restoration applicant.
Yes, this is a request for an access point on the Heron Road, just for a single-family residence. There's an existing access on the north end of the property, and they're getting that taken out as part of the construction of this new home. And the access that they're proposing is about 100 feet away from the nearest access, which is actually on the other side of Heron Road, and about 147 feet from the assisted living facility. This road is classified as a local collector in our driveways and other access ways ordinance. New accesses onto collectors or arterials have to be approved by the Planning Commission and the Board, Mayor and Alderman. And they also are needing a variance from the requirement to have 200 feet between access points on a collector street, as they would be within 100 feet, so it would be a 100-foot variance. The rationale for this access is that it gets them closer to the curve so that they can actually see cars coming up the hill from North Campbell Station. So it's actually a safer location than where the current access is on the north end, because by the time people get up the hill and make that curve and someone's pulling out, there's a short, there's kind of a blind issue there. So engineering has looked at this and is in agreement with this access and sees no issues with it. The staff recommends approval of this access and the associated 100-foot variance.
Does anybody on the Planning Commission have any questions or comments? Is the applicant here? Do they have anything to say?
That was very well described.
Could you please come up to the microphone?
Of course.
They can't hear you at home.
Yeah, I gotcha.
And we need your name and address, please.
Yeah, yes, my name is James Reeve of 2204 Missy Trace in Knoxville, 37919. Mr. Shipley did a very good job explaining the motivation and rationale for doing this. It is really all about creating a line of sight for the cars that are coming up the hill, up the curve, if you're familiar with that area, next to the Assisted Home Center. At the existing driveway, it's actually blind to our left from that curve. And in designing this site plan, our thoughts were to try to eliminate that hazard a little bit by allowing us to have a clearer line of sight as we egress and ingress from that driveway. So it's as Mr. Shipley suggested.
Thank you.
Mr. Reeve, can I ask you a real quick question? Because
Yes.
you're obviously familiar with this. Can you see that the driveway of the house that's across the street and down some, can you see their driveway from your driveway? I'm just concerned about that line of sight.
Yes, I can see that driveway.
Okay.
Yes, in fact,
All right.
by the fact that I'm at that position, everything's visible all the way to the light. Everything gets very clear from that spot,
Okay. That's all I had.
okay?
Anyone else?
Makes sense to me. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Was that on the variance, Mark, or just
Would be
combination?
both,
Holidays.
access and the variance.
Oh, both? Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's fine. Yeah.
Item number
This will go to the board, the mayor and alderman, and they'll take final action on it, so.
Thank you.
Can look online and see when that is.
Well, we'll let him know, won't we? We'll let the applicant know when it's on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Item number 4, discussion and public hearing on a final plat for the Meadows on Mcfee Subdivision, Phase 1, 5.25 acres, 19 lots, zoned R-1, OSR Lynch Survey LLC applicant.
This is the first phase for Meadows on Mcfee, which is on the west side of Mcfee Road, one parcel south of Mcfee Park. This particular phase has 19 house lots. It's situated north of the transmission line easement. They have pretty much taken care of most of the field-related items that are needed in order to be presented to the Planning Commission, and the staff recommends approval of this final plat subject to the 4 conditions that were sent to you all and the applicant. And those really involve letters of credit, getting the signatures on the plat, and finishing up the site items.
Go. Tell us who you are.
Yeah, Russ Rackley, Rackley Engineering, P.O. Box 30456, Knoxville. Yeah, we respectfully ask for approval, subject to the 4 conditions as staff stated. We have no issue with those conditions.
Thank you.
Be happy to
Anybody have
answer.
any questions or comments for the applicant or Mark?
I'm going to move for approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Russ.
Okay. Item number 7, discussion and public hearing on a site plan revision for the Renaissance Farragut development. Proposed addition of 2 office buildings, 12756 and 12760 Kingston Pike, 22.15 acres total development site. Affected area zoned O-1, Myers Brother Holding applicants.
Madam Chairman, if you'd let the record reflect that I have a personal interest in this, and I will be recusing myself from this agenda item and the room.
Thank you.
Yeah, this particular agenda item, there was actually a site plan as part of the original Renaissance development that involved these 2 pads as well that was approved. So this is really a revision to that original plan. They obviously never finished these 2 buildings as part of the earlier construction. These buildings are situated in the southwest corner of Renaissance development. To the south is Old Stage Hills Subdivision, and to the west is Sienna Subdivision. There's actually a walking trail that they'll be connecting into Renaissance that was stubbed out to the property when Sienna was developed. The office buildings that they're proposing will be a smaller footprint than what the other Renaissance buildings are, pretty substantially smaller. So there'll be more green space. They're also proposing, and this was talked about at the staff developer meeting, more residential roof lines as opposed to the flat roof on the remainder of Renaissance to help transition to those abutting subdivisions. And they also are proposing some roll-up garage doors, basically for delivery of office materials. This property is zoned office, so both of these will be office buildings. I think there'll be 2 units in each building. So the roll-up door is kind of a new concept, but I think we'll probably be seeing more of that with offices in the future. It's just a more convenient way to deliver materials, and with the web-based kind of needs that people have increasingly, then that's going to be probably something we'll see more of those. So the property really is pretty limited as far as visibility. There's not, you really couldn't see it from Kingston Pike at this point. And again, the rationale for these buildings being different was that the pitch would be more residential in appearance, as well as the scale, the one level, smaller footprints and less lot coverage, and more landscaped area. So, and that is talked about in our architectural design standards as far as ways to transition to surrounding neighborhoods. So that's the landscape plan that they're proposing and will be taken to the VRB. The parking lot has kind of already been graded and, with a kind of a binder level of completion, but they're obviously going to have to finish that up and make some improvements to that and restripe it and those kinds of things. There's actually one whole tier of parking that's being removed because of the size of the buildings. It's smaller. The amount of parking that's required is less. So they are taking away a fair amount of hard surface in comparison with what was originally approved. So that's pretty much a summary of this project. The staff recommends approval subject to the 7 items that are at your places.
Does anybody have any questions for Mark? We'll start with Mark first. Anybody have any questions of Mark? Nick, you having introduced yourself and
Hello, my name is Nick Myers Brothers Holdings. The address is 12748 Kingston Pike. I'm super happy to be here today. Had 2 really long Zoom calls today, so to be here in person is an absolute treat because I do not do well on a Zoom call that lasts for hours and hours. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Is that hip roof design? Is that what you got there, Nick?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And then I brought a couple samples of the roofing material and the brick, all the veneers brick.
All brick?
Yes, sir. We love brick.
yes.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, I appreciate that you thought about the fact that there's a housing development right back there, and that this is going to blend right into it. That's a thoughtful design.
Well, if y'all remember, those of you that were here, we actually permitted both of those pads years ago with buildings that look like the ones that are there, and I never thought it would be a decade that I would before I was back to permit those again, but it is. But we do think that this product is a better product than what we originally planned. As you all know, that was a really, really tough site. There's a lot of topographical challenges, but we're optimistic that this is going to be very, very well received.
And you are in agreement with taking care of these 7?
Could I see the 7? I see the 4, and that's probably my bad that I didn't.
There were actually 11. I took
Yeah, I've got an
some
extra
off
copy.
from earlier.
Okay.
So they were building code. So there's a drainage permit fee, the letter of credit for erosion control, striping the handicap spaces properly. They're actually 12 foot's not the current ADA standard, so you'd need to, that's an easy
Yeah,
fix.
that's fine. I saw this. I somehow managed to print out a older version that had 4. So,
Okay.
It was 10 on the original.
Structural plans for the retaining walls, the color material boards, which you did that. The HVAC screens, they either need to be screened and include a detail or have some clarification that they cannot be seen from an adjacent property or right-of-way. And if they can't, then they don't need to be screened. And then just including the actual exterior light fixtures that were part of the original on the lighting plan so that they're all together. So all those, from my perspective, are pretty minor.
Are you okay with those?
oh yeah, they are. I've actually had seen that. I just, for whatever reason, the one that got put in my book that I printed off to bring here only had 4, but I think it just came from an earlier date. So, yeah, those absolutely fine.
I move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Appreciate y'all.
Thank
Thank you very
you.
much.
Item number 8, discussion on a zoning map amendment, rezoning request from Agricultural District A to Rural Single Family Residential District R-1, 44.33 acres, tax map 152, parcel 33.03 and 33.04, 721 Virtue Road and 12444 Evans Road, Robert G. Campbell and Associates applicant. This is for discussion purposes only tonight, and we are dealing with the rezoning here.
Mark, can you wait till Noah returns, please? Commissioner Myers?
Yeah. Where you at?
Should have just left him back there.
Brotherly love.
Okay. Yeah, this is, like all our rezonings, this is a workshop discussion. This involves a zoning map amendment request for 2 tracts, actually, that collectively total a little over 44 acres in the Evans Road, Virtue Road part of the town. One of the tracts fronts on Evans Road for about 360 feet to the west of the cemetery. And the other, and that's about 22 acres. They're both about 22 acres. There's a barn and a horse riding track on that property. The second tract, where the house is situated, fronts on Evans Road for about 250 feet and Virtue Road for over 1,100 feet. The properties are currently zoned agricultural, which requires a minimum 5-acre lot size. The applicant may potentially subdivide the property into lots that are smaller than 5 acres, so they're requesting to rezone it from agricultural to rural residential R1, which requires a minimum 20,000 square foot lot if you have sanitary sewer available. The R1 district is compatible with other subdivisions in the immediate area, like the farm at Willow Creek and Vista. They're both zoned R1. The future land use map actually has this area and much of the southwest as open space cluster. And that was one of the things that staff talked about with the engineer at the staff developer meeting. The property has some, like most properties in East Tennessee, it has some physical challenges. It's got a kind of a drainage way and some steep slopes. And the question was whether they might want to consider the OSR, the open space residential. It would be consistent with the future land use map and potentially give them some more flexibility on lot configuration, lot frontages, lot sizes, because there's a lot more flexibility there, and still have that base density of 20,000 square foot minimum. So that's one of the questions, I think, dealing with the zoning map amendment. I think the applicant did include like a very preliminary idea of kind of what they might envision at some point in the future. Obviously, that would be a separate review and submittal process. It's not really relevant to this rezoning because R1 doesn't require a concept plan, but that kind of gives you an idea for the rationale from rezoning it from agricultural to R1. So with that, I mean, that's really the only question. I think the R1 is fine as well. The OSR is probably more consistent with the future land use map, and we may need to update the future land use map to very low density residential if R1 ultimately is what they want to go with and is approved by the Board of Mayor and Alderman. So if anybody has any questions, I think Steve is here, the applicant's here, if you have any questions of him.
I have none.
No one on the planning commission, any questions, comments? Do you have any cards? Any?
Not on this item, no, I don't.
Okay.
Did Steve, did Robert talk with you about the OSR? I don't know if you're interested in that or not.
I'm familiar with that. We looked at that and discussed it, but I'm trying to just do the 13 estate-size lots and maintain it. My goal is the lots that we have are big enough to where we can have an estate-size lot and have normal yard, then have a little place for maybe a horse.
Okay.
So
Well-
I think you can have a horse per acre and a quarter, if I recall correctly my numbers.
If you have an acre, just an acre in R1.
Well, I was just saying, if I've got 4 acres, I can have like a three-quarter acre lot to mow, and then I can have a little fenced area for a horse.
Yeah.
Maybe 2, depending on
I don't have
I
don't have a regulation
Yeah,
on the
well,
number of horses.
Yeah,
on it.
we currently have sheep and horses and a donkey, so you
Okay.
kind of have a formula for that.
That was really the only question I had with the zoning map amendment was if they wanted to look at that OSR. You could still do estate lot sizes in OSR. All that really says is you have a little bit more flexibility in how you configure the lots.
I'll go back and
all
look
that.
at that. Maybe I missed something. I mean, I just told you what I want to do, so.
Now, the one thing is it has a 35% open space, but that drainage area and some of your steep slopes that would
work for that.
potentially- So you might want to look at that before
Who owns or keeps up the open space?
well, normally that's the homeowners association.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it'd be like a separate lot, and you'd have to have some kind of a restrictions that would
Yeah,
deal with that. in the
I'll look at
future.
that, but my first thought would be on estate-size lots. Everybody moves to an estate-size lot for their elbow room, and they kind of like to have as much elbow room as they can and kind of like own it and have their little horse or two and maybe,
And you could do that with OSR, so just
okay.
keep
It
that in
wouldn't
mind.
preclude
There's
animals.
no lot size in there. There's
And
no
there's-
minimum, no maximum.
How about animals?
So-
Sheep?
No, that's fine,
Okay.
because it's based on the R1. It's based on R1, so that is just an overlay of the R1.
Would that one change the little, I called it mini barn? I know in R1 you can have a little barn for the animal.
Yeah, I don't think that would be an issue. I can double check that.
Okay, I'll look at that and see, but I don't know if it really matter. I'm just trying to make it as simple as
Yeah, either one's
possible.
fine. You can look at it, and if you want to go with R1, that's fine too.
Okay, I'll look it over.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a general question? Because
Yeah.
there is, in OSR, there is the requirement of setting aside 35% open space.
Yeah.
And if you're doing estate-sized lots, who takes care of that? Who, would that?
It would be a homeowners association, so in
Then
this
you're
case,
leaving it to, you're creating having to create an
group as a
HOA.
whole
You would have to
would,
create an HOA.
just like any other,
Okay.
yeah.
Now, the downside to that would be you're taking 44 acres, and I'll do maybe a little quick math here. 35%, that's 15 acres. That'd be better off to let them have that for their animals, because that's kind of their thing. Okay.
Yeah. It was just a question. Either one's fine. We probably would need to update the future land use map to make it
We've
very
got-
low density
We've got
residential.
some other updates we need
Yeah, I
to do
know.
anyway, so
Yeah,
that, we can catch that with that one.
that's a minor update,
Yeah.
so.
Steve, I like your R1. I think it's a good fit. I think you've got a good marketable product, and there's definitely demand for the estate lot. So if you want to do R1, stick with R1.
Okay, I like R1.
Yeah, me too.
It keeps us with what we've been for 32 years out there, so.
Right.
I like that.
What's your smallest lot size on your proposed
The
concept
smallest lot, if I can barely see, but the one that's facing Evans Road, and I think it's maybe over an acre and a quarter,
Well,
okay.
Let's try to stick to the zoning tonight and before we get into the details of a concept plan. But I think R1's a great use, and I applaud you for it. I mean,
Oh, thank you.
it differentiates you from basically anybody else that's developing right now, and you'll have a product that nobody else will have. So I'd say go for it. It's a beautiful farm, and we appreciate everything you've always done and in the community, and you sure have taken good care of it. So
And we've taken care of Patriots Corner too, you know
yeah,
that.
oh yeah, sure.
So, Mark, when will this be?
We'll put it
the-
on for a recommendation next time, so,
Okay.
yep.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Item number 11, discussion and public hearing on a request to amend the Farragut Municipal Code Appendix A zoning.
Actually, it's number 9.
Oh, 9?
I'm going to go
okay.
into the other PowerPoint now.
Okay.
Corridor study, which is-
Trying to get us out of here before the storm.
Maybe we'll make it. I think the storm's coming in about 9:15 is what it looks like.
We're gonna make that.
Okay, number 9, discussion on the Grigsby Chapel Road corridors traffic study, Town of Farragut applicant. And this also is for discussion purposes only tonight.
It'll come up here. I don't know what's going on. I had it minimized and
Good evening. It's been a little while since I've been in front of Planning Commission. You guys look good.
You need to tell us who you are.
Oh, I'm sorry. I am Darrell Smith, Town Engineer. I do exist.
We need a bar stool. This packet's pretty darn long. We may be here a while tonight, so may have to pull up a bar stool and sit over there and hang out because this one's going to take a while. But we do. There's a lot of information here. We do appreciate it, Darrell. And
Sure.
Lord knows this is something that we've heard a lot of residents have concerns about, and we appreciate the opportunities that the town's given us to look at some ways to be able to deal with some of the traffic that Grigsby
Sure.
Chapel has had for a lot of years. So
That's true.
thank you.
Last year, when the Board of Mayor and Aldermen were going through the CIP projects, a subject came up that brought on quite a long discussion at that time. It was motorist safety on Grigsby Chapel Road. Excuse me. Particularly motorists that are entering Grigsby Chapel Road from a dozen or more side roads. We went through several options, looking at all of the pros and the cons of anything we do. Ultimately, the board decided it was the best path was to bring in a traffic engineering consultant to do a thorough study and make recommendations. John Gould with CDM Smith is with us tonight. He is the author of the report that you got several days ago, so with that, I'll turn it over to John.
John Gould with CDM Smith. We have a number of slides to go through.
Can you give us an address, too, for your business, please?
Address is 1100 Marion Street, Knoxville, Tennessee.
Thank you.
We have a number of slides to go through. Hopefully, we'll go through quite a few of them fairly quickly unless you all have questions. If you do have any questions during this presentation, please stop me, and we'll certainly try to address those questions at that time. First slide, please. What we wanted to concentrate on for the Grigsby Chapel Road is obviously the traffic capacity and level of service. Traffic safety is paramount for the corridor, as well as questions about the traffic control throughout the corridor. All these are sort of related to each other, and capacity and all that are affected by traffic control, and obviously safety is a result of all these conditions. So, next slide, please. As you all know, the Grigsby Chapel Road, the location of it is identified in this slide here. Next. Grigsby Chapel Road is a 3-lane divided as well as a 2-lane, or 2-lane divided as well as a 3-lane undivided with a center turn lane in some of the locations at the intersections. Essentially a 1.5 mile roadway that extends from Smith Road to Campbell Station Road. Next slide. This project involved quite a bit of data collection. We essentially conducted 13 turning movement counts along the corridor, as well as a number of ATCs, automated traffic counts. We did these both during July before or during school's absence or while they were out for the summer break, as well as in the end of August when school was in session. So essentially we collected data twice for this corridor in order to look at the conditions with and without schools operating. This is just geometry showing the traffic control throughout the corridor, as well as the lanes through the corridor. We have a multi-way stop there at Smith Road, as well. Most everything else through that corridor are side street stop signs, and obviously when you come to Campbell Station Road, a signalized intersection. Next slide. What we have here are the essentially the July counts. These are the ATCs at the 3 locations along the corridor. You might note I don't know if you can see my pointer or not, but you can see pretty much down here, during the AM peak, which is a little bit lower than what you see with the essentially the westbound in the evening. If you go to the next slide, this is the August count, where you can, all of a sudden you can see that AM peak that peaks now. That is really associated with school traffic. So you can see, again, a major increase during the AM peak hour. Next slide. This shows a comparison at the ATC locations, the essentially July and August counts. For the most part, the ADTs are fairly comparable. They're slightly higher, obviously, in the August counts, but again, fairly comparable. We did a speed survey, pretty much in the midpoint of the Grigsby Chapel Road, as we identify essentially the 85th percentile is somewhere between the 39 to 44 miles per hour. Here is pretty much what the daily variations look like. Again, if you look at the average daily traffic, it's fairly comparable, slightly higher perhaps for the August counts, but not significantly higher. But if you look at the PM peak, again, very comparable, but not, again, not a significant difference between the July and August counts. However, if you again look at the AM count, you can see a big difference between the July and August traffic data. Next slide. These are turning movements counts that we did. These are the peak hours. We've got a bunch of these. We probably can just go through them unless you all have questions. But I guess the one thing I would note at intersection 11 with the St. John's Court, you can take a look at the side street traffic volumes. Go to the next slide and the next slide. You can see the big difference between the July and August with the, again, intersection 11 St. John Court. All of a sudden, with the school being in session, you have quite a bit more traffic that occurs on the St. John Court approach. Next slide. The thing, as we talked about, traffic safety along the corridor, we did an intensive accident history survey for the entire corridor. What we have here at Fretz Road, we identified sort of a concentration of 6 accidents. You can see towards the Parkside intersection with Campbell Station Road, you can see a lot of accidents occurring at that approach as well. Next slide. Again, concentration of accidents occurring pretty much at Woodchase, as well as at St. John Court, and again, we're showing up there as Fretz Road. Again, these concentrations are essentially 6 accidents at St. John Court, 7 accidents at Woodchase. This is over a 5-year period. The total number of accidents along the Grigsby Chapel Road is 77 accidents for the entire 5-year period. Next slide. These are actual diagrams where we have the concentrations. Again, this just looks at those locations where we have more of a concentration. It breaks it down to the types of accidents as well as whether or not they have any type of property damage versus injuries and fatalities. The one thing along the corridor, we did find one fatality. That fatality was associated with not another vehicle. It was off the road, and it was alcohol and drug related. Next slide.
I did.
Okay. Again, same thing. These are just the intersections where we kind of had some concentrations. We broke it down a little bit more detail. We did this for all the intersections, but however, where we had the concentrations, we went into a little bit more detail. Next slide. This is the corridor crash history. As you can see, again, we talk about numbers at each of the intersections that we studied. The interesting part of this corridor is that we carry about anywhere between 12 to 16,000 vehicles per day, depending on the weather in July and August. But again, it carries quite a bit of traffic. One of the things I found quite interesting is the accident rate for the corridor is actually below the statewide average. In all my years of doing traffic engineering, usually with a roadway that carries this much traffic, usually exceeds the statewide average. This was probably one of the first corridors I've come across in which the accident rate is below the statewide average. I was quite interested when I found out that to be true. We looked at the intersection sight distances. We can go through a lot of these. I just went through a couple of them just to bring out that we did look at what the sight distances were from each of the approach intersections. Anything over 445 feet is corner sight distance, which is very desirable. minimum sight distance is 305 feet for a posted speed of 40 miles per hour. So here, these intersections obviously are showing very good sight distance and nothing that would concern the operations of the intersections. Where we have, go back. Where we have some vegetation restrictions on the intersection of Weatherly Hills Boulevard, again, sight distance is 275 feet. So it is a little bit substandard for both the corner sight distance as minimum stopping sight distance. Here, we would recommend some clearance of some of the vegetation in order to improve that sight distance. Next slide. Again, here we have Fox Den to the left. Looking out, we have a 250-foot sight distance. Again, we would recommend some improvement of that line of sight. St. John Court, again, the sight distance to the right is more than sufficient for safe conditions. To the left, it's below the desirable, but it exceeds the minimum stopping sight distance for the intersection. We went through and calculated capacities and levels of service for the corridor. And this pretty much shows what those levels of service are based on the approaches, left turns, and so forth. And for the most part, levels of service are very good along the corridor. The ones that show some lower levels of service are usually your four-legged intersections, usually as a result of having greater number of conflict points, in which case it usually shows a little less or a little greater delay and lower level of service in those cases. However, in a lot of those cases, you have a situation where they have turn lanes. People are using those turn lanes to essentially do a two-stage maneuver to Grigsby Chapel Road, in which case they're really not experiencing the delays that might be associated with that level of service.
Explain two-lane. Explain what you're talking about.
Level of service?
No, you said two-lane.
Okay, where we have, at a lot of the intersections, you have essentially the three-lane section where we have a two-way left turn lane. And what people will do is come out from the side street, go into that two-way left turn lane, and then merge the traffic on Grigsby Chapel Road.
Okay.
So they're not looking at both directions at the same time. They're looking at one, getting out in the center turn lane, and then looking to the other direction for making sure they can merge.
Thank you. I wanted that for the audience's benefit. Okay.
Very good. Again, level of service along the corridor, other than some of the four-legged intersections, we're showing very good levels of service. There was nothing there from a capacity standpoint that really concerned us for the corridor. There at the intersection at Smith Road, where we do have a multi-way stop, a little bit higher type of traffic control. We do have a level of service after in the morning. At a multi-way stop, that is quite a bit of delay. For that type of traffic control, it's not necessarily concerning. It's really limited to the AM peak, but it is a level of service that you don't typically like to see along at any particular intersection. And it's limited for the most part for the Smith Road approach as well as the northbound approach from Smith Road. Again, these are just level of service. We can go through those. There's nothing here that I can really highlight. You might go back to one more. Go back two more. Yeah, let me just point out one thing.
This one?
One more, back. You can see at the intersection of St. John Court, again, we have good levels of service from St. John Court, level of service C or better. And if you go, now go, advance please. Advance. This is with the August count when school's in session, and you can see the level of service F now occurring for the AM peak coming out of St. John Court. The evening peak, you also have quite a bit of delay. We were out there observing a lot of the traffic there. It's a little bit better managed in the PM peak when school dismisses versus the AM peak when you have the drop-offs. It's a little bit more concentrated and really within about a half an hour period. So we have a concentrated period of lower or greater delays resulting in a lower level of service.
So you deem it spread out more in the afternoon? Is that what you're saying?
I think they manage it differently, yes. It's spread out more in the afternoon. Yes, sir. Next slide. This is the summary of the levels of service that we determined for the corridor. Again, you see the vast majority of the intersections are operating at very good levels of service. We have a few that are, like we said, some of the four-legged intersections where it might be a lower level of service. However, again, what we determined, what we found, people are utilizing that center turn lane, which minimizes delay and allows those people to egress and get onto Grisby Chapel Road. We did the signal warrant analysis for the corridor. This is signal warrants that were done for the July conditions. What we determined that the Smith Road and the Grisby Chapel meets signal warrants for more than 8 hours. You have a definite conditions where signals are justified and can be warranted and would mitigate some of the levels of service that you have at that intersection. Whereas the other intersection that we really looked at was St. John Court, no warrants established. Fretz Road, no warrants were established. And Woodchase, no warrants were established. Next slide. Now, when we look at the August counts when school's in session, again, Smith Road, there's no question. You got many, many hours where the signal can be justified. St. John Court meets a 4-hour warrant and a peak hour warrant. And Fretz Road meets a peak hour warrant. The one thing you really want to take into account, TDOT, for their own evaluation of signals, will not really consider a peak hour or a 4-hour. They concentrate on an 8-hour warrant. They like to see benefits of signalization to be usually a minimum of 8 hours versus a part of the day where, where the rest of the part of the day you won't necessarily have justification for signalization. As well as during those outside the 4 hours or outside that peak hour, you all of a sudden are increasing delays potentially for the side street or for the traffic on the main street. These are the levels of service that are associated with the change in traffic control. One of the other things we looked at were roundabouts in lieu of traffic signalization. Again, levels of service were very good. Roundabout provided a very good level of service as well. Next slide. This is the summary. This, again, goes back to the signal warrant evaluation. This is the summarizes it. Again, Fretz Road just meets the peak hour warrant. St. John Court meets both a 4-hour and a peak hour. And Smith Road meets pretty much all the volume warrants associated with the METCD, the Manual Uniform Traffic Control Devices. Next slide.
I think that's it. Oh.
These are showing what the queues are associated with that change with signalization. Whenever you have signalization, you have queues. And what we determined was essentially probably a queue not much greater than 300 feet at any of the intersections that would be potentially signalized. That 300 feet is essentially about 12 vehicles on essentially a 2-lane roadway or a single-lane approach in those cases. One of the things with any type of signalization, a lot of times it will mitigate a lot of your angle crashes at on an intersection. But when you do signalization, you will often introduce rear-end collisions. And when you have queues, and these are not unacceptable queues, however, on a 2-lane roadway, people aren't going to be accustomed to it, and they will result in rear-end accidents. Right now, you do have a accident rate that's below statewide average, and I commend the city and town regarding the fact it's operating very well out there. With the introduction of signals, you will have some accidents associated with them, and we didn't identify any accident problem with any of the intersections or the corridor in absence of any type of signalization and so forth. So again, you have a good operating corridor. Signals will introduce probably an increase in crashes potentially at where you put those traffic signals. Again, we looked at the roundabouts in lieu of signalization. A lot of times, a lot of states are now really kind of pushing roundabouts versus signals. Again, essentially the type of accidents associated with roundabouts are less critical. Usually more side swipes versus, say, angles, and so they really prefer roundabouts. However, obviously looking through the Grisby Chapel corridor, the impacts of a roundabout, essentially this is showing a 130-foot type of roundabout, which is really what the recommendation would be. And you can see the impact pretty much on the intersection and on the adjacent properties. So obviously, to consider these things, it would obviously involve a lot of the residents along the streets, and obviously a lot of people would be impacted. Again, this just shows what the impacts are at the intersection. These are the recommendations. Obviously, we did identify a few intersections that had lines of sight that we would like to see improved, so maybe some vegetation clearance, some mitigation of those lines of sight if we can. Right now, Grigsby Chapel Road, or some of the medians along the corridor, does not have keep right signing, which is typically standard for medians. In absence of those, you really need to be very aggressive about markings of those approaches, and require pretty much a constant maintenance in order to maximize that delineation of the islands. So we made that recommendation. We thought, again, the Smith Road intersection has basically no question of signals being warranted there. It's more than 8 hours. It's an intersection that's currently failing during the AM peak for both the July and August conditions. And again, it meets signal warrants for both July and August conditions. So we thought that was a signal that certainly could be justified for the corridor.
Could you discuss a little more about that versus the roundabout at that location? We could go back to that roundabout view graphic we went through pretty quickly. Yeah, the one on the.
It was the last one.
You have one of that
Right
one,
there.
do you?
I thought I saw it.
There it is.
You can do one at Smith Road.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the impact is for the intersection, and obviously you have some properties that are right adjacent to it.
Looks like a roundabout to me.
Yeah. So you can see again what the impact is to the intersection and to the adjacent properties. It would be an intersection that if it were to be a roundabout would operate at a very good level of service. The cost associated with a roundabout is significantly higher than a traffic signal too.
But it's it won't create the traffic gaps at St. John that would be beneficial, would it?
Yeah, roundabouts do not create gaps for the most part. They are what a lot of us in the profession will consider a continuous flow traffic control device. So essentially, you're not stopping anybody. You're slowing them down through the intersection, but you're not providing any gaps for the most part.
So it's just the opposite.
Yes, it doesn't create gaps.
Compared to a signal, that's correct. Mm-hmm. You can go back to the recommendations. I know with the conditions we have at St. John, I've seen out there the amount of traffic that queues up there during both the AM and PM peak. Again, it does not meet an 8-hour warrant, so you will not get benefit of signalization throughout the day. You would probably increase delays on St. John Court during the off-peak hours. We think you may get some gaps from the Smith Road intersection. You really don't have the accidents, as I indicated, at that intersection. You had 6 accidents over a period of 5 years. An accident warrant for signalization is usually 5 accidents within a calendar year. And obviously with 6 accidents over a period of 5 years, it's not even close to warrant any type of accident. So the intersection, people know the traffic on Grigsby Chapel. I was really kind of impressed when I was observing out there. I actually took some video out there myself. And traffic actually moves relatively well, given the conditions and what happens during the dismissal of St. John Newman. I was impressed how the people handle the traffic during those peak hours. But we think, again, with signalization of Smith Road, there might provide some additional gaps to St. John Court, and it may help some of the traffic conditions there. We think that if you start with that signalization, you can see what the impacts are associated with St. John Court, whether or not it improves it, and maybe look at that down the road, whether or not you really need the signalization of St. John Court.
John, do you think having a signalized intersection at Smith Road, would that help discourage some of the through traffic that area gets, Smith Road and Grigsby Chapel? I mean, how does that work as a deterrent?
I don't think the signalization is going to be a deterrent, in my mind.
Well, you don't think the chance of catching a red light is a deterrent?
Right now, it's a multi-way stop, so you're going to stop regardless at this point. I can tell you right now, I live in the North City. I drive Grigsby Chapel on a regular basis to go over to Parkside Drive and so forth. And I can tell you, if signalizing that intersection, I do not think would deter me from
Well, let me ask you this. Would it encourage people to use that aren't using it?
I don't think it's going to have a significant impact.
Okay.
No.
Well, I mean, do you have any recommendations? Because my instinct is, and I do drive that area a lot, And I work in West Farragut, and if I'm over at Parkside Drive, the easiest way to get from West Farragut to Parkside Drive is through this intersection, through Smith Road. Do you have any recommendations of what, I mean, we tried the islands, and the islands are awesome. They require a lot of maintenance. I think they may or may not discourage people from traveling on there. I think they do help a little bit with speed. But would you have any recommendations to discourage some of the through traffic? Because to me, 15,000 cars a day is a lot of traffic.
It's a lot of traffic. It's a minor arterial. It carries. I was really surprised to see the volume of traffic on it. And when I was out there and doing it, matter of fact, looking at the sight distances, things like that, it's a pretty continuous flow. I mean, it does carry quite a bit of traffic. There's no question about that. Trying to deter traffic, I can tell you one of the reasons why I drive that way is obviously you have, the town has the intersection to Campbell Station Road and Kingston Pike, which is essentially over capacity and saturated. And that is a way people are avoiding that left turn movement. And I believe that's actually something that's being studied right now, and some way to alleviate or mitigate that particular capacity issue. With that resolved, I think there would be some traffic that would maybe continue on Kingston Pike and then getting onto Campbell Station Road, using something other than Grigsby Chapel.
Mr. Goodall, this was really very helpful. It identified issues I really didn't realize we had with Hollyoaks and St. Charles and those two intersections. Did not realize that that's where the issue apparently is, all year long. So I was appreciative to see these numbers because it really did help us really understand what's going on this corridor. But I would be remiss as a person who's really trying to get a control on our speed of our roads. And I'm going to beat up the engineering field just a little bit because I have the opportunity to. So on page 2.1 of your existing traffic conditions, you mentioned the automatic traffic count at Weatherly Hills found prevailing speed at 85th percentile at 44 miles per hour eastbound and 39 miles per hour westbound, thereby confirming the posted speed limit of 40 mile per hour as appropriate. This frustrates me from the perspective of 40 miles per hour might be appropriate as an 85th percentile measuring of car speed, but it is not appropriate for pedestrian safety. And I'm looking forward to the day that the engineering field of vehicular travel catches up with the idea that we need to address pedestrian safety as well, because someone gets hit going 40 miles per hour, a car going 40 miles per hour, and this is a residential area, their likelihood of survival is pretty low. So, and we have people trying to cross this street to get to Greenway Trails on the other side. Now, we are trying to identify, we've funded in our upcoming budget a opportunity to identify some mid-block crosswalks, because the only two crosswalks we have are at Grigsby Chapel and at close to the intersection at Campbell Station and at Smith Road. So there's about 1.5 miles between two crosswalks where people are trying to get across. So that frustrates me just because I know that from a federal funding point of view, the feds have tied funding to us having to start addressing and improving safety on all our public roads, including our local roads, which includes addressing requirements to lower non-motorized serious injuries. And if every time we're looking at a road and we're identifying that it's appropriately, it's got the appropriate speed limit because that's the 85th percentile, and we're ignoring that there's pedestrians there, I think there's an opportunity to lower the speed limit here.
Well, let me first say real quick, the 85th percentile is not because of the posted speed limit.
I understand that.
Okay.
It's the flow of the...
It's based on what people are comfortable driving at. People do not look at their speedometer on a local road. They drive at what's comfortable to them.
Yeah.
And lowering it will not have that impact because, again, they're not driving by their speedometer. So,
Well, and I understand what you're saying, but I will say this, giving Grigsby Chapel, and I drive it all the time as well, I'm on Fox Run, I can drive that road going 30, 35 miles per hour and feel comfortable. But I have people running up
That's
the
correct.
back of me because the speed limit is 40 and they expect to at least be able to go 40. So I would love, if we look at these pedestrian crosswalks, I would love to take the opportunity to maybe drop it to 35 because we have, Everett Road is marked for 30 and you can't go 30 on Everett Road. It's so uncomfortable. Whereas Grigsby Chapel, if we could possibly line either side of the road, we may narrow that vision up a little bit. I'm taking too long on this particular thing because that's not why what we're here for.
It's an issue that you see in a lot of municipalities. Again, what people are comfortable driving at and how people do drive. Like you said, you're going slower and people are right on it. Not necessarily because it's posted 40, because that's what they're comfortable, and now you're essentially holding them up. And also based on what they've obviously exercised during probably many times that they drive the road. The comfort has a lot to do with it, and that really gets into the design. You've added the medians out there, which I'm sure has actually lowered that a little bit. Maybe to the 40. I'm not sure what the prevailing speeds might have been prior to those medians being out there. But constricting the width of the roadway has a lot to do with, geometry has a lot to do with it. But the conditions out there that exist today are where people are comfortable at doing 40 miles per hour. Now, the reduction of that, again, you essentially would just result in more violators than anything else. You would not necessarily have any lower speeds on that roadway. You would increase your number of violators. The one thing to keep in mind too, once you lower that speed as well, signal warrants totally change. You go to essentially what we call a full warrant. Right now, with it being posted 40, it allows you to look at what we call reduced warrants, which takes into account that higher speed. It would actually potentially mitigate any type of signalization along the roadway. But again, that's based on the posted speed and whether or not people are driving it. We look at both posted speed and prevailing speeds when we look at signal warrants.
Okay, and I appreciate all, and I understand all that. This is a conversation that I think we will forever be kind of looped into because pedestrian safety matters, and we've created a road that's too fast.
Yeah, where you do have the pedestrians, you have the flasher, and I think that's a device that obviously I think probably has some impact on how their safety.
Yeah.
And if you were looking at some additional locations, there certainly might be some other considerations for those type devices in order to ensure their safety crossing the roads. Yes.
Yep. I'm just going to go through where I tab stuff off. You noted you mentioned regarding our delineation of our medians must be aggressively maintained and additional raised pavement markers. What's that? What are raised pavement markers?
Raised pavement markings, you'll see a lot of them on interstates. You'll see them on local roads as well. But those are the reflectors that are actually on the pavement, on top of the pavement, or sometimes embedded in the pavement, depending on whether or not you have plows and whether or not you're going to scoop them up during snowfalls.
Okay. Another thing I was noticing, and I know I'm not going to get too much more into that conversation, of reducing the speed also improves intersection line of sight distance and minimum stopping distance. Of course, you'd have to have willing vehicular travel that's going to do that. But that's a notice because there are issues, particularly at Chapel Grove Lane, turning right. They don't have a very good Farragut Commons Drive, turning left. And that's usually those that they're heading towards the Campbell Station Road. Those are issues for them, and they are really close to that road. So
yes,
I did want to. I've noticed the Deanwood Lane, St. Charles Lane, Weatherly Hills Boulevard, and Woodchase Drive, which leads me to believe that a signal at St. John might be helpful in relieving some of the level of service there. I did want to say this. You state that in your conclusions about a traffic control from a human.
That's correct.
And I'm struggling with that. Not creating rear-ending, whereas a traffic light, you could also have your, be prepared to stop when flashing, on both of the approaches and have your traffic light, and then they have warning that they're going to come, going to be seeing a traffic light that's in operation, whereas you don't know that there's somebody controlling that traffic if it's somebody like a sheriff's officer.
Yeah, one of the things from the sheriff's department, one of the things we would certainly make a strong recommendation that, and I believe with the rates that we identified in the report, identified the vehicle being available in. Flashing blue lights have a lot of impact on how traffic approaches a particular location. That individual sheriff department officer who's might be controlling traffic would have those, or should have those blue lights, and that would certainly go a long way in providing them with the necessary protection for anybody approaching the intersection.
And that's fine coming if you're coming westbound, but eastbound, you're coming around that turn, and people can come barreling around that turn, and if there's a stopped queue, then that's going to create a problem.
And that's one of the reasons, again, when we talk about signalization, you do have potential of rear-end collisions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the reason why that would be one of our concerns about signalizing St. John Court for essentially a period of 4 hours where it might be justified, and then during the, say, the July months or summer months where it's really not justified, you run into that situation where, essentially a part-time signal, but it does create queues throughout the day where you might increase the number of rear-end collisions.
Well, and I would contend to you that I understand what you're saying, but looking at Deanwood Lane, if our goal is not simply to control traffic at St. John Court, but also to provide some gaps, the Hollyoaks and St. Charles and Weatherly Hills and Woodchase need relief throughout the year. They don't just need relief during the school year, they need relief throughout the year. There's some failing opportunities at both of these, failing or D, or E, I'm sorry. And so that might...
Those levels of service, as I indicated, I mean, for the most part, it's because it's a four-legged intersection, you have a little bit more conflict.
Yeah.
What mitigates that is the two-way left turn lane that's available to them to make those maneuvers. And that's the reason why you really don't have the accidents occurring at that intersection to a point of being actually a concern. And so those levels of service, though not necessarily desirable, they are actually mitigated with the type of control or type of markings that you have out in the street.
I understand. I still believe that if we had a traffic light out there and at St. John and had signage or the flashing, be prepared to stop when flashing on either end of it, would be a lot more effective than a sheriff's officer as far as safety and as far as safety to the person who's directing the traffic, because that's a vulnerability. And then there's the consistency of someone having to be out there every day, whereas with your traffic signal, you have it timed, and the rest of the time it can be flashing red and yellow and...
We typically do not recommend a part-time signal in that type of operation. We would not flash that signal during if we flashed the signal at any time, it would be late night. We would not flash it during the daytime, in which case, you're talking about maybe operating it for just a couple hours of the day.
Yeah.
That really surprises people's reaction to it, and you will definitely have rear-end collisions associated with it.
I'm just trying to think outside the box. 'cause
That's-
I know
and
that
I
the
appreciate that.
The residents on this corridor are struggling, and they've been struggling for some time. And I know that this report was very frustrating to them. It's a very...
What really caught me by surprise is that the fact of the matter is that the accident rate is so low for that roadway. It really told me that though there's that level of traffic, that volume of traffic, it's actually operating in a fairly safe manner.
During these accidents, did any of them concern pedestrians?
Not that I recall, no.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions or
We have
comments?
a couple of citizen comments, unless you all have some. You want me to call them to the...
I'm Gary Steimer, I live at 809 O'Connell Drive in Farragut, I live in Prestwick Place, and St. John's is that's the first subdivision it goes through. And the subdivisions there are a little different than the rest of the roads coming off of Grigsby Chapel, because we have 3 major subdivisions, a school, and a church. So the traffic coming out and going in exceeds what it does on the other ones. See if I can read my chicken scratch here. Another problem we have on Grigsby Chapel is safety thing. I don't know whether you addressed it or not. When St. John's Court, where it intersects with Grigsby Chapel, there's a left and right turn lane. Cars stop right next to each other. So if somebody's looking to the right, they can't see. If somebody's looking to the left, they can't see. You just got to hope that your neighbor pulls up and waits for you to get out. It creates a very, very unsafe problem. I think you know what I'm talking about. And that needs to be remedied somehow. Has your study been completed, sir?
Yes, sir.
I noticed this week I saw a counter going across St. John's Court right as you turn off Grigsby Chapel. Do we know anything about that?
I know that they do counts. I don't know about the cameras, but I know that TDOT does counts every so often.
Okay,
That
yeah, it's a
may
rubber
be-
hose going across there.
Yeah,
I
they,
think it's one of theirs.
yeah,
Okay.
they do
Yeah.
counts
Do
every
we
so
know why they're
often.
doing it?
They just
They
random,
update their
Okay.
counts.
randomly do things like that.
Okay.
They don't tell us, they just do it.
Mr. Stein, they keep counts. If you go on the KGIS or our local organization keeps counts that they look at. I think it's an annual count that they go out and they get all these different areas that they get information on. Yeah.
Last year, a study was done. I don't know if it was done by your company or another company. And the result of that was that a traffic light was warranted at St. John's Court. And the council budgeted funding for that for this fiscal year, or this calendar year, however it runs. Is that negated by this study?
That study came up with the same warrants as this study. So it met 2 of the warrants. There's 8 total warrants?
There's 11 total warrants.
Okay. So this study, this more in-depth study came up with the same 2, correct? Am I correct,
I'm
Darryl?
not-
Same 2 warrants?
I think that's correct.
Same 2 warrants during the school time.
Okay, because what I understood when I sat for the last meeting was that a traffic light was warranted. There was no stipulation on, the different types of warrants. As that was warranted, and I think they budgeted, I don't know how many thousands of dollars, which is probably still in the budget.
It's the same 2 they found the same 2 warrants.
Okay.
It didn't meet the 8-hour warrant, which is the one that TDOT is, what Mr. Gould is,
So if it does not meet the 8-hour warrant, they won't recommend a traffic light. What happens if the study with Smith Road says, doesn't change anything? Can we go ahead and approve a traffic light there anyway?
You can, yes, you can. It's a warranted signal based on the peak hour and 4-hour warrant. Those are legitimate warrants. TDOT doesn't look at them because they're limited benefit. And that's the reason why they don't typically respect them to the degree that some others might. The peak hour and 4-hour, like you say, kind of, again, it's a benefit. It's kind of limited versus an 8-hour warrant, which is essentially an all-day type of benefit versus.
But as the Vice Mayor indicated, has anybody looked at if you put a signal there, whether it's a positive effect on the downstream subdivisions going towards North Campbell Station? Whether it gives them time to get out?
Given the operation of that signal, that if you put a signal at St. John Court, unless you operate it in a pre-time condition, again, it's going to be green on Grigsby Chapel. You might actually increase speeds, people accelerating at the signal and so forth. You're going to increase delays somewhat on St. John Court especially during the off-peak. You probably mitigate it a little bit during the peak hours. Downstream from that, again, that light, that St. John Court is probably going to be green the vast majority of the time. So you're really not going to affect the traffic at those other intersections, other than during maybe the peak hours of the day.
And unless you take your traffic study and take the light and what's the word I'm looking for? Put it in a computer and make it timed to where it will help those people downstream. Put a program in there to make it work at the proper times.
If I were to signalize an intersection for downstream, I would basically operate as a pre-time, which actually probably increase delay even further on the St. John Court.
But wouldn't that possibly, I'm kind of getting, instead of putting sensors in the pavement that senses where the cars are, you could say, we're going to run this light for 3 minutes green, and then we're going to give 30 seconds of green to St. John. Wouldn't that create the gaps and possibly discourage some of that through traffic?
That's what I'm referring to as pre-timed. Essentially, you take out the detection.
So we just said we don't have detection. Now, the downside to it is if you live in St. John Court and you want to run to the grocery store Sunday afternoon, you may be frustrated waiting there for 3 minutes till your light turns green. But
Except if you're going to Ingles, you can take a right turn, you don't have to worry.
well, that's
Right on
true.
there.
There you go.
Angles.
So you're cutting through on Kingston Pike.
The other thing that I want to point out here is we like to generally follow TDOT's recommendations, but this is not a TDOT road, so we don't have to follow. We don't have to do what if this was Kingston Pike or if this was Concord Road. That's different. We do have to follow their rules, but here we don't have to follow the rules. So just because it doesn't meet TDOT warrants, it may still meet our warrants.
That is correct. And, TDOT warrants, even them are a little bit flexible on some of those other warrants. However, again, the overall premise is, again, the benefit of the signalization. And yes, it's your decision. It is a warrant signal. You can justify based on that warrant whether or not you get that much benefit. You're going to have maybe some increased accidents associated. You're going to have some increased delay associated with it because you're also, again, slowing down traffic with the changing of the light.
Well, I'm just thinking all of a sudden, I'm kind of thinking of the traffic pattern at Dixie Lee Junction has changed due to the additional signals that have been installed over the past few years. And so, and again, I'm not trying to go down a rabbit hole, but what I have noticed anecdotally as a traffic novice is that there's a lot of traffic that used to go through Dixie Lee Junction that now goes down Old Stage Road. And I think they're doing it to bypass the traffic lights. So my thought is if you had 2 signalized intersections, or even 3 signalized intersections on Gracie Chapel, let's say one's Fretz, one's St. John, and one is Smith Road, boy, that'd be a heck of a deterrent for discouraging through traffic. Now, the folks that live on St. John, that live anywhere on that corridor, they may be a little frustrated during off-peak times that it may take them a little longer to get to Parkside Drive. It may take them a little longer to get to Ingalls. But, everybody's asking us, hey, can you reduce traffic? And I'm not sure how else to reduce traffic but to try to discourage it. And it seems, like I said, at Dixie Lee Junction, it sure does work because you can ask anybody that lives on Old Stage Road how much more traffic there is on Old Stage Road, and it's basically bypassing Dixie Lee Junction. And you can, you can basically bypass 4 signalized intersections by going down Old Stage Road. I'm just throwing out an idea of seeing what things might stick. They may not be, normal traffic principles about, how to get a lot of traffic from point A to point B, but we've heard this planning commission and the board of mayor and aldermen, they've heard from these folks on Greasy Chapel for a lot of years, and there's a lot of folks that are frustrated. And the good news is you're providing us empirical data. You're not the bad guy. We're not mad at you because you're not telling us to put more stoplights in or saying, that's not, good traffic design. But you're giving us good empirical information, hopefully to make better decisions. And we appreciate that.
So as someone who regularly travels that way from Lenore City, would 3 traffic signals deter you from going that way? Which way would you go if there were 3 signals on?
I drive Dixie Lee Junction all the time. Matter of fact, when you mentioned Old Stage, I've driven it when I wanted to go for a scenic route.
No.
And we did some of the design work on Old Stage, so I certainly go out there to see how it's being utilized and so forth. But it's not an alternative path for me because the signals along Kingston Pike and at Dixie Lee Junction just aren't.
It may be exacerbated right now because of the construction at Watt Road.
Yes,
So maybe it's a temporary issue. I guess I'm just trying to throw out ideas of earlier when I mentioned, are there some things that we could do to discourage non-local traffic from using Grigsby Chapel? I'd like to hear those ideas.
Well, the other side of the coin is whenever you look at what Darrell and them has planned for Campbell Station to mitigate some of that.
You mean with the Jamestown and all that, yeah?
Then if you had the lights, they're going to weigh, well, should I go that way or should I just keep going because I'm not having.
Let me point out one thing, though.
Daryl, can you come up to the microphone?
I just got a couple more points.
If we deter traffic away from Grigsby Chapel Road, where will it go? What route will it use?
Right,
On
that's-
Kingston Pike.
That's kind of why I was asking him
So-
if he'd go.
If we push 6,000 vehicles off of Grigsby Chapel Road, that's a pretty acceptable, I mean, it's a big chunk.
We get rid of third of, okay.
But we don't have problems on Kingston Pike.
Well, I mean, I've sat through Campbell Station and Kingston Pike. What do you call it when how many times the light has to change? There's a traffic
cycle.
Cycle. I mean, there's sometimes I'll set 3 or 4 cycles trying to turn left on Campbell Station.
We're doing our best to try to
Yeah.
reduce that problem.
I would agree, just to add on to that, we've just completed Concord Road, which is now putting, instead of 2 lanes, went to 5 lanes. Now we have 5 lanes heading straight up from Concord Circle to the heart of our town. We have 2 state highways coming through the middle of our town. And we're getting no help from Knox County or Loudoun County to absorb, provide a way to disperse the traffic.
I just want to point out that there are pros and cons to anything. I'm all for anything we could do to lower the amount of traffic on Grigsby Chapel Road. But if that is exacerbating a problem that we already have.
Because my rationale is, I just don't think Grigsby Chapel Road was ever designed for 15,000 cars a day.
That wasn't its original intent.
No, I don't think that was the original
A lot of
intent.
roads around here that just, when they were envisioned and designed 100 years ago or 50
Yeah.
years ago, no one ever would have thought we would have that volume of traffic.
Yeah. I think if you're looking at 4,000 vehicles on Smith Road, west of the 3-way stop, there's a lot of traffic turning onto Everett, going up to Smith Road, cutting across to Grigsby Chapel. Make that route every time they go. Can't say that I blame them. It's a pretty drive, but I'm just a little concerned if we start moving traffic problems around. We're kind of playing whack-a-mole.
Yeah, and you've got the other problem of frustration of folks. You go to over-signalization.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's
right.
true.
There's no
Really,
perfect
The goal
scenario
here
where everybody's
No,
pleased.
I'll get out of John's way
all
here.
along was to create gaps to help the residents along Grigsby Chapel. That really was the goal of this, is to, how are we helping the residents that live on, or in neighborhoods or on Grigsby Chapel to get out of their driveways or get out of their neighborhoods more, I guess, conveniently during peak hours.
Well, I mean, I can tell you, if you're pulling out of Chapel Grove, trying to make a left turn at 8 a.m., a light down at Smith Road is not going to do it. It's too far away.
Yeah.
Those gaps are going to be filled by the time they get all the way down to Fretz or Chapel Grove or,
Yeah, but if you look at the studies, the biggest problem is at Hollyoaks and St. Charles and Weatherly Hills and Wood Chase, which are certainly much closer to.
that's true.
And
I
those
was
are,
surprised to see the problem, say, in St. Charles.
Yeah,
I was
that's the
surprised
one
that
thing I'll
was-
be really, like I said, the level of service is an F, but again, it's mitigated by the way the traffic is actually traveling it.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't be necessarily emphasizing those intersections, because I really don't think they have the problem. I didn't see anything really queued up there. I didn't see any operational problems at those intersections. It's really, I'll be honest with you, it's the analysis with a 4-legged intersection that I think creates that perception. But let me go back to your question real quick. I don't think the signalization would have any deterrent to the Grigsby Chapel Road. In all honesty, I think really resolving some of the issues, capacity issues that are on Kingston Pike would probably go a ways on trying to mitigate the amount of traffic that Grigsby Chapel is experiencing.
Okay.
2 more points, I'll get out of here. If, in fact, they decide to go with the last bullet there, signalize St. John Court following evaluation, is there money in the budget to do that as soon as that light's put in at Smith Road? In other words, they put in Smith Road, they could evaluate in a couple weeks whether or not it works. Is there money then to signal, if it's determined, to signal St. John's Court?
I think you'd want a little bit more than a couple of weeks to determine the traffic counts and to see what kind of effect it has, because like what you would hope, would be that possibly it would deter people from going that way. They may not get off the freeway, and they may go on down to Watt Road instead of getting off there and cutting through. So I think it'd take a little bit more than just a couple of weeks to see if that would be a help or a hindrance.
What I'm getting
hope
at,
it'd be a
Mayor, is,
help,
we've
so.
been at this year after year after year, and it's sort of kicking the can down the road. When do we stop kicking the can? Is it going to be this year? Is it going to be next year?
That's the reason we're doing what we're doing here,
Yeah,
okay?
I agree.
It's,
I
you know, it's, we've got to learn in order to make what we consider rational decisions.
Well, couldn't the Board of Mayor and Aldermen amend the dollars that were put in the CIP for St. John and reallocate it to Smith Road in 1 year, and then test Smith Road for a year, and then say, okay, this is not working to our satisfaction, and then come back and throw some more money in the budget for
Certainly.
the St. John?
Yeah.
You'd also want to look at it again. Obviously, I don't know that it would need to be as detailed as this, but
Right.
you'd want to look at the effect on and compare to what we've got right now.
We'd also want to go ahead with our study of the mid-block crossings, because the mid-block crossings may also affect this as well. So I think if you take all of it into account, because I'd like to see mid-block crossings.
Yeah.
Some safety. I mean, we're looking at safety more than we are convenience, and I think that's really needs to be on our minds is the safety issue on that street. So, and that was really the reason that we went into a more in-depth study like what we have, because of the safety. So it's and we have a lot of people that walk on that street. It's probably the second most that I see. I think Turkey Creek Road's probably the most, and then that's probably the second most as far as walkers. So it's and I'm sure people would love to have a mid-block crossing.
Yeah.
Instead of having to walk from one end to the other just to get across.
Well, they don't. They just play.
Run across.
Yeah, that's
And
not
there's several
safe.
considerations to look at even when you put a signal in, like at St. John's Court, for instance. And that's because, people see a light turning, what's the next thing they do? They hit the accelerator, or they run the red light.
Yeah.
So there's no perfect, you got some.
That's
you
my
gotta look at the
concern as
safety,
well.
the integrated safety aspects of that corridor.
Yeah, some stuff you can't fix. I mean,
That's right.
You can't.
Yeah, can't fix stupid.
Just
Yeah.
the human nature part of it is,
And the last thing I'll remark on, and you all know this just as well, not better than I do, is whatever we do this go-around is going to have to last, because Grigsby Chapel ain't going to get any better. And as they keep building west of us, it's going to get worse as those developments come up. So we got to come up with a pretty solid solution that we're not coming back 5 years from now and trying to fix something that's unfixable. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Good points.
People that have signed up, if you want to take those.
Do you have anything else you wanted to say?
I think there's another gentleman.
Yeah.
that got the hand up.
Who do we have?
The ones that have signed up is, I have Scott Meyer and Bill Derbyshire.
that must be Bill.
The gentleman in the hat didn't sign up?
No.
I'm Bill Derbyshire, principal of St. John Newman Catholic School, 625 St. John Court. I would like to thank the Vice Mayor for all of her comments. She hit most of the ones that I was concerned about. There are a couple that I am still a little concerned about. One is speed during the school zone. Where the speed detector was placed was an awful long way from where our school zone is. And if any of you have been sitting at St. John Court during the school zone hours, cars go pretty fast through there. Was there any consideration for the speed during the school zones? Because as a principal, my ultimate duty is to protect my children that come to this school. And heaven forbid I lose one at that intersection. And it only takes one. But that's my concern. The other concern that I have, and that was not addressed in there, is I'm a parishioner of the church also. And there was no mention whatsoever in that report about the church traffic at the 4 masses that we have at the church. And on Saturday at 4:30, average attendance from January till now was about 320 at 4:30. Say 2 people per car, that's an extra 160 cars trying to get out at 4:30. 8:30, it's 240 for that same time period. 10:30 mass, 350. So that's a lot of additional traffic that is trying to get in and out on that road, other than normal weekend traffic. Those are my biggest concerns right now. And again, thank you, Vice Mayor. You hit most of mine. So I thank you for your support. So thank you.
I have a question for you. I noticed there are kids that do walk to school. Do you have very many kids that walk or ride a bicycle to school?
I can think of 3.
Mostly because it's not safe enough.
Yes, and most of them don't ever cross Grigsby Chapel Road. They get on the
green
whatever, yes, on our side. Some walk back in on O'Connell Drive and those, but no. And I have a bunch that live in Village Green that they just won't do that. Parents won't let them do that.
And I think that is one of our biggest challenges as a community. If we ever want to really consider ourselves pedestrian safe and pedestrian friendly, and I know this is maybe pie in the sky, walking to school is one of those, or riding your bike to school is one of those things, one of those goals that we should be aspiring to. And we certainly, this is going to be our struggle, dealing with vehicular traffic and wanting kids to be able to have that traditional great experience that we all had growing up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else with questions or comments? Scott?
So Scott Meyer, 12824 Stall Drive. So Miss Rita, I'm sorry, we're going to try to get you out of here before the storms, but I can't promise you that. Since I'm one of the 5 folks who get the final decision, I'm going to be selfish and pick your brains for a second. I appreciate all the information you've given us. This is not a debate, so I don't need you to respond after I ask my questions, because I heard from you and I appreciate it. And by the way, the data is fantastic. So in no ways am I in any way debating the information in here. A couple things. Daryl, I'm a little bit surprised that there is a recommendation to talk to the sheriff about a cross guard, because in the BOMA workshop, I think I made it really clear that Mr. Derbyshire doesn't have $40,000 in his budget to pay for that. So I don't think that's realistic. So I want to make that premise to you all that St. John Newman, just like any other school in Farragut, is not responsible for creating safe roads. We are. You all and me, not the school. And they don't have the money to begin with. So I don't think, and then, by the way, the other question I have for you in this recommendation, another reason why I think it needs to come out is because who's going to manage the cross guard? Mr. Derbyshire or you? So if the cross guard decides he or she's tired from getting flipped off because the cars are going by and screaming at him like they do at Farragut Primary, is it going to be your job to try to find a cross guard? Daryl, is it yours? Is it yours? Is it yours? Whose is it? So that's not realistic, and that needs to come out. So, so here's my bottom line. So to pick your brains, as I look at this data, I do think I see a lot of C's. And although the data might show us that from an engineering perspective, the roads are okay or working very well, I think, to quote you, I would tell you from my constituents that they don't like C's. I would tell you as a parent of a student at St. John Newman, every day I pull out left and try to go towards Campbell Station, it's a very fearful experience. And I think what this data does not reflect is the fear and the concern that I think, Noah, you've mentioned multiple times. Over the years, we've heard concern from residents all along Grigsby Chapel, because it is not a exciting thing to do to pull out across a busy road with children in your car trying to turn left and hope you don't get hit. So this doesn't measure the fear and the concern that the residents have. And it shouldn't, because you're engineers, and just like CPAs, you don't have a heart, neither do I. So I'm okay with that. But I hope you all do, right? Oh, I'm sorry, you had an engineer too? Sorry. So here's my question. So when I look at the data, I see that there's some neighborhoods, and again, I didn't realize these neighborhoods had issues, but they do. The vice mayor's mentioned them. Noah, you mentioned that we don't necessarily have to use TDOT as a standard, right? So St. John Court does meet two types of warrants, the 4-hour and the peak. So if I consider that, I consider there's some neighborhoods down here, they're having some issues that don't have gaps to pull out of their subdivision. Would you as a planning commission think that I'm off base if I said we should probably put some kind of stoplight at St. John Court that can be timed? Or to the vice mayor's point, maybe we have flashing signs that you pull up and the sign's flashing saying, hey, there's a stoplight, you need to get ready to stop, and then we don't run it in non-peak hours. Am I off base?
I think if we're going to do a stoplight, we do a normal stoplight. If you want to flash it at night, I think flashing it at night would be fine. But my instinct is, and again, I'm far from a traffic expert, but my instinct is just because of human nature. If you're only running that stoplight from, I don't know, let's say 7:30 to 9:30, and then you're going to let it just flash, until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I think you're asking for folks that are just on autopilot going through there to have a terrible accident. And again, I don't know the data that says that this is a good or bad decision, but that's my instinct.
But wouldn't you think the cross guard would cause the same thing?
Well, my thought is I actually probably should just support a signal. Let's just do a regular signal there.
Okay. So
And
you're,
I mean,
so
no,
you're
I'm
okay.
not,
Good.
I'm not the decision
Ed, what do you
maker, the
think?
Board of Mayor and Alderman is, but
Well,
my thought is
the reason here, I already had voiced what I wanted, and now we paid $70,000 for a study that kind of showed us already what we knew, and we've punted it down the road, and now we're here with you. And so we are expecting some kind of expertise comment. So I appreciate that, Noah, that you're thinking, yeah, a signal would work. What about you, Shannon? What do you think?
As long as the unintended consequences of putting the signal there have been evaluated and the benefit outweighs the risk
Yep.
of the additional accidents and stuff, then I'm fine with the signal there.
Thank you. What about you, Michael?
I'm concerned about a safety light or signal light causing additional traffic problems and accidents. That's a major concern. I want it to be safer,
Sure.
not
And if I read this, I was scared too all about the signal, but I thought, well, why isn't it scary about the cross guard? But you don't hear any scary comments in this study about the cross guard, do you? And what's interesting is a signal, those little flashing lights will probably work all the time, right? But who's going to tell all those folks who apparently zone out when they drive or aren't paying attention that, hey, Scott, the fat cross guard up here, he's not here today. So make sure you don't run into anybody. Does that make sense?
well. Yeah,
Okay.
I experienced that from Farragut Primary,
Okay.
turning right or left. heaven
Yeah, because the
forbid.
guy quit. I guess the guy who was the
Yes.
crossing guard quit because people
Yes,
flipped him off and he
because
took off, and
well-
now here we go. Another circus.
Yeah,
Humans probably don't work very well
right.
controlling traffic.
That's
What
my
about
only
you, Ed?
concern is increasing
sorry.
traffic accidents.
Thank you. Thank you. What about you, Ed?
Well, I'm kind of at a point where I'd like to see the Smith Road have a little bit of feel for that one, to
Okay.
know how that would operate. I would definitely support a light based on what that would tell us.
Okay.
No,
But
I
couldn't-
wouldn't wait a year to do it. I think,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to get a little bit where maybe close enough to where you've got non-school school to kind of get a little bit more of what's going on there.
Could you live with a light at St. John Court?
That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, I thought you said Smith.
Well, I'm talking about we're gonna, if we do
Okay.
that one, then you evaluate its impact on.
Okay,
on
gotcha.
that
Okay, so
corridor.
you could live
you
with one at St. John
understand
Court then.
How you're, helping the problem or moving the problem or how, to see what, to evaluate what would happen at St. John's Court before you
Great.
do it.
Thank you. Thank you. And Ms. Rita, I can't step down without hearing from you.
I'm concerned too about the people just not paying attention the rest of the time, but I
So
think
it needs
it's,
to be operational the whole time.
right.
Well, I think it's like, I think it's
least
like
all day.
what Noah said.
I think so.
In the town of Farragut, we actually used to flash the lights on Kingston Pike at night.
I wish we still do that at 3 a.m. When I go deer hunt at 3 a.m. and I'm sitting at an intersection with nobody within sight with miles. And I'm sitting there with a camera saying, if I run this thing out, and there's nobody there. There's got to be some common sense.
And there was a comment earlier about some of the residents getting, I guess, frustrated with having to wait that live on the Grigsby Chapel, live in a subdivision. I don't think any resident I've talked to is going to be mad if they're waiting a couple minutes to, in the evening, waiting to turn right when they get that big benefit during the morning. And I don't speak for all of them, but I certainly have spoken to quite a few of them over the last 4 years. And I've heard from just as many as you all have, if not more. And the majority want some kind of gap measure of some kind to where they can get out of their subdivisions and not have that angst that I don't think would ever come clearly in a study like this from engineers. No offense, my non-caring engineers, but friends, but it's not going to measure that angst. But it's there, I know it is. Thank you. Oh, go ahead, Mayor. Oh, sorry, Rhea.
No.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Rita's not done.
Yes, I am.
With me, okay, good.
I got another speaker.
Joel Garman, 638 St. John Court. I live directly across from St. John Newman. Y'all are very good neighbors, by the way. Thank you. I'm one of the residents there that's against the signaling at St. John Court. It does back up. But turning left, which is almost exclusively the way I turn, you go up there, you look, there's almost always a gap after 2 or 3 or 4 cars. You do have to pay attention. You can't just, arbitrarily pull out. But that corridor, according to the study, is below average in accidents, and we're talking about increasing the accidents by putting stuff in there. That does not make any sense to me. The people in Farragut driving are very polite. I've lived all over the country in a lot of big cities. They're very polite here. They will let you out. They do slow down. If you put a light at Smith Road and it gives any type of gap at all, then you won't have much of a problem. Now, there are times on Sunday mornings that the people coming out of church, but that's a very low volume time on Grigsby Chapel anyway, on Sunday morning. Or Saturday afternoon even. It's not a peak time. I'd have to ask the study, but I don't think that was a peak time. So the idea of trading delays, which is all you're doing, you're trading delays off of St. John Court to put them into Grigsby Chapel, and then you're talking about increasing the likelihood of accidents, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm one of those unfeeling engineers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott, you asked for my opinion.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I would love to hear your opinion.
I'm an engineer as well. So.
Oh, I know you don't have any.
Let me make a couple comments real quick.
I have more than you think. I really think that the warrant for Smith Road is real. According to the minister there, I'd be hard pressed to try to do something for the church for Mass, because I've had other churches ask for lights. I have police officers standing in Kingston Pike for the Baptist church when they have services. So to try to do something specifically for a church is not something that I could look at and say is a good idea, okay? But now for safety, it's a different story, and I think safety is what we're looking at here. As far as angst, do we look at convenience versus safety? There's convenience both ways, okay? And there's safety both ways. It just depends on which way you're going on how you look at it. Now, he looked at it one way, this other gentleman looked at it the other way. So it's going 2 different ways. So as far as the gaps, again, I agree, the Smith Road would give the gap, and I think it would be a sufficient gap, because that's something that traffic studies will tell you, how long does that light need to be? Do we wait till it backs up to 12 cars before it turns, or do we do it at 6? It's something that, again, the engineers study this, and they look at things like that once they have something to work with. Now, right now, we don't have anything to work with. We don't have a light there. if you have a light there, then you've got something to work with. And like he said, it may be that it's another light needed, but like he said, it may not. You know, it's just a deal that you have to look at it, but it would take something to work with to start with, and we don't have that right now. So, but again, I would look at mid-block crossings like the Vice Mayor's talking about, because those are, I think, equally important, because the walkability is something that, for some reason, we're so car-centric that that just goes right over our head when it comes time to look at projects, and that needs to change. And the mid-block crossing is something that traffic engineers hate to see them because they think they're not productive, that they're dangerous, but if they're done correctly, we've got 2 of them that's got lights, and I think both of them work quite well. I know the one on Watt Road does, and then we see the one at Grigsby Chapel that works. So I think that there's 2 sides to this as far as the need, but when you say that it'll meet 8 hours, then I think that right there will tell you that it is a good warrant. The other one, we'll just have to wait and see based on if we put the Smith Road one in, then we've got something to work with. Because you can vary the timing on it based on the time of day that you want to set it. And maybe in the morning it may last a little bit longer. It may back up 12 cars before it turns green. Where on the side street it may back up 6 before it turns green. So you have to really have something to work with before you really start just saying, well, we're going to put 3 lights in right here, and right here. And I think you're...
Can I ask you one more question, though? But so, and back to Noah's... I'm sorry, I know there's a storm.
No, you need to get to the...
Oh, I'm sorry, just one more question.
Well, while you're walking up there, if at Smith Road, people right now are used to stopping at Smith Road, so I would think that there would be a...
Yeah.
That's true, too. That's true, too.
Right there
True, too.
at Smith Road and Grigsby Chapel. So perhaps there would not be as many accidents because of that.
So what is your, okay, so I'm just trying to make sure I understand this. And I like Noah's idea because I'm really more on Noah's plane where I'm trying to figure out a way to deter traffic. And maybe I shouldn't say that, but I just said it. And it's on public record. I'm trying to get traffic off of Grigsby Chapel. I'd rather it be on Kingston Pike and Kingston Pike become a problem so other people won't drive Kingston Pike. They'll take Watt Road to I-40 and stay out of Farragut. But with that being said, is there a way... Do you think, Noah, that if we kept the stop sign at Smith Road and the stoplight at St. John Court, would that be a deterrent from folks trying to use Grigsby Chapel? Because it's like I have to stop here, and I have to go around the corner, and there's a stoplight, and would that help divert traffic? Because I hear what you're saying. You know, you don't want to exacerbate a problem. I would rather the problem be on Kingston Pike than in a massive residential area, which is what we have right now. So,
I think you create rear enders because
okay.
That's my thought. You'd have rear enders when you come around that corner.
Okay.
You've stopped, you've took off. Okay, no stoplight there, just stop sign. You've took off, and you go around that corner, and then there's a light, and there's somebody stopped. And I think you'd create rear enders where if you had it at Smith Road and you had the gap to where the people that's coming out of the subdivisions. You said there's 4, I think, that's in that area. Mm-hmm. So that would give, I think, them the gap that they would need in order to come out. Now, with school traffic, then I think Darrell's group could look at the timing to be a little bit different during peak. That's one of the things that he talked about was the peak times, and I think you need to pay attention to the peak times whenever you're timing lights. So that's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
I don't want to argue with you, okay?
Oh, I'm not going to argue. I'm just curious. I mean, to me, I like Noah's idea of trying to get people off of Grigsby Chapel, or that was something you mentioned.
There's a lot of non-local traffic on Grigsby Chapel.
No offense,
for
but,
better or for
you know.
worse, and we're delighted for folks to come into our community and spend money at our stores, but there are areas that weren't designed for all that through traffic. You had asked me a question about the stoplights. My thought is, one stoplight at Smith Road is probably not going to do anything to discourage through traffic. And based upon just some experience, again, at Dixley Junction before the construction at Watt Road, is that it's probably going to take a couple of stoplights. But I also support the idea of the intersection that is most failing is Smith Road. The empirical data is shown that tonight. So my thought is, do a full signalized intersection at Smith Road, reevaluate if it doesn't improve things at St. John, and it's at a minimum, if it's not improving the two areas of warrants, the 1 hour and the 4 hour warrants, then St. John should get a signalized intersection also.
Okay.
The curves don't bother me. We think of Kingston Pike between Old Stage Road and Everett Road, both of which are signalized. There are curves through there. Now we have flashing lights that says, "Hey, idiot, there's a traffic signal ahead. You need to be paying attention."
Right.
We might have to do the same thing on Grigsby Chapel. So that's kind of my line of thinking is that, and St. John Court may very well still meet warrants, and we didn't improve the situation with the light at Smith Road, but being that Smith Road is in the one that's actually in dire straits, so to speak, hit that one first, and let's see if there's any improvements down the corridor.
Appreciate your input.
Sure.
Like the mayor said, in putting more traffic on Kingston Pike, you also have to consider that there's a school on Kingston Pike now.
And they have a stoplight, by the way. They have a stoplight at their parking lot. And this isn't.
Talking about Concord Creek.
Yeah, they have a stoplight at their parking lot. Because my kids used to go there too.
A lot of traffic.
Oh, right.
Yeah, they have a stoplight.
At Farragut Crossing.
Yeah, and St. John Newman, excuse me, is not at the intersection of St. John Court and Grigsby Chapel. So it's not a church or school
But it also goes
thing.
into a subdivision. And as somebody who used to travel that 3 or 4 days a week and early in the morning, the people use the parking lot at the church, and they use the one going into the other subdivision. So they don't just go. In fact, I saw very many that actually use the traffic light. They do the parking lot, and they do that other entrance down there, Bel Air. So, so you put another 1,000, 2,000 people at that time of the morning in rush hour, and that school. Plus, they're going through the high school, middle school, and elementary school. And so all of that needs to be taken into consideration.
Okay. Thanks for your input.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
Well, y'all's tired, you want to get out of here.
We got a long agenda left, so it's all right. We're here for the duration.
Personally, I've never had, there's a lot of traffic on Smith Road and Grigsby Chapel. Personally, I've never had an issue having to wait long to get through that intersection. It's just not one that backs up.
You know about the one at Smith Road?
Yeah.
Okay.
Smith Road, it's not a traffic problem to me, and I'm on it all the time. If you put a traffic light there, it's going to create a problem for people coming from the Kingston Pike direction where it turns and it goes downhill. There's a sharp turn, and you cannot see the intersection. So if you talk about somebody coming too quick, you're going to have rear enders there. Just a thought. The other thought I have is if you put the traffic light at Smith Road to make stop gates for traffic going towards Kingston's Pike, that's good. For our subdivision, turning right is never a problem. You can always get out turning right. It's crossing 2 lanes and turning left. So that outside lane going towards Kingston Pike, there may be a stop gate and it's clear, but you got traffic coming from Kingston Pike. And if it's not timed right, you got one lane's empty and the other's full of traffic. Because when that traffic light opens at Campbell Station and Grigsby Chapel, you get 40 or 50 cars at a time. So if they're not slaved off each other, there's going to be a problem there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess if you don't mind, if I make a couple comments to some of the concerns that were
Please.
expressed here. One of the things that really did impress me was how traffic does dissipate on St. John Court. It queues up, goes back to essentially the driveway to the school, but it dissipates in about 5 or 6 minutes. For a school to dissipate like that was actually pretty impressive, and I think it has a lot to do with how you all actually discharge the students in the afternoon, which is actually I commend you all for. But you talked about the flasher. The flashers probably has a lot to do with that. I think the current flasher that's actuated with the St. John Court approach, I think that does slow traffic down. I think that's the reason why you don't have an accident problem at that location. I think that's the reason why that queue of traffic does dissipate within that period of time. So there's some benefit to that flasher that's occurring. That's what I associated with how that intersection operated. Both the schools.
School zone flasher?
It's a speed. It operates, I think, throughout the day with anybody that comes onto the St. John Court approach. I think it's actuated, if I'm correct.
There's a loop detector on St.
Say okay, there's a car. in the intersection
There's a
there.
car coming out from St.
I
John
thought there was
Court.
a school zone flashers there.
There's school zone as
there
well,
is?
yes.
Okay.
Separate
Okay.
flags.
Yes, you have both those, and I think that has a lot to do with the current operation of the intersection.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody
Good
else?
discussion.
Yes. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? If not, we will move on to item number 11.
Second, I've got to
Discussion and
pull up
public
the other-
hearing on a request to amend the Farragut Municipal Code Appendix A zoning, Chapter 3, Section 12, General Commercial C-1, Subsection F, 9, height regulations to provide for a concept plan review when a building of more than 2 stories in height is proposed for the town of Farragut applicant.
Madam Chair, I move to take a small
Trying
break.
to pull this up again.
Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break then. please. And I will once again do number 11. Read number 11, discussion and public hearing on a request to amend the Farragut Municipal Code, Appendix A, zoning, Chapter 3, Section 12, General Commercial C-1, Subsection F, 9, height regulation to provide for a concept plan review when a building more than 2 stories in height is proposed. Town of Farragut applicant.
This item, and actually the next two after it, we all workshopped last month, and they all involve amendments to the zoning ordinance. They all have been presented to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, at least conceptually, and received favorable input. This first one is related to the C1 zoning district, and specifically the subsection 4 that deals with the mixed-use town center. In that area, you can have buildings that could go up to 4 stories. And the original intent of that was to encourage vertical mixed-use buildings and to try to have a height allowance that was compatible with the town center zoning district. What the specific request with this item involves is to, if someone is proposing a building more than 2 stories in height, because the minimum is 2 stories for a new building in the mixed-use town center. So if you're wanting to go more than 2, there would be a little bit more thorough review and approval in the form of a concept plan that would have to be approved by the Planning Commission before a site plan is submitted. And so basically, this would allow the Planning Commission to look at the request and see whether it was, compatible with the surrounding plan of development. What's the relationship of the building to its surroundings, other buildings, the streets? What are the community objectives that might be achieved from going taller? So all those things would be factored into the review of the concept plan before it goes to the site plan stage. So that's really all that Ordinance 22-03 is providing for. I made some modifications based on your all's input last month, a couple of minor word changes. But other than that, the staff recommends approval of Ordinance 22-03 through Resolution PC-22-03.
Does anybody have any questions or comments on this?
I think we pretty well covered.
I think it works.
Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item number 12, discussion and public hearing on a request to amend the Farragut Municipal Code Appendix A, zoning, Chapter 3, Section 13, Neighborhood Convenience Commercial, NCC, to remove apartment buildings as a residential use and require a concept plan in association with the rezoning request to NCC. Town of Farragut applicant.
This was reviewed, as I mentioned earlier, last month, and basically I gave an overview of this district, how it came about, and what its goals are. It is a commercial district that allows a mix of residential and commercial. So the specific request was twofold. One was the current residential mixture could be detached and attached single-family and apartment buildings. So one of the requests was to take the apartment building option out. And then the second, because this district does allow the opportunity to mix residential and non-residential, to have a concept plan review before property is actually rezoned to this district, similar to what we did with the OSMR a few months ago. And so that would give the Planning Commission, before they recommend a rezoning, the ability to understand what an applicant's intent would be as far as the type of residential they want to have, the mixture, the ratio. So that's really what is mostly addressed, those two items in Ordinance 22-04. I did add, based on our conversation last month, some language dealing with the residential density. And so basically I added some language in there that basically says, for purposes of calculating the residential density, the concept plan shall establish the portion of the development devoted to residential uses that shall also include vertical mixed-use buildings with residential on the non-ground floor, because I think we still want to encourage that if someone wants to do it and it's appropriate. And that the remaining land areas that are not devoted to residential uses shall not be included in the area used to calculate the residential density. The proposed delineation of the residential portion of the property, because this can be a little tricky, needs to be evaluated by the Planning Commission as to whether the limits are logical and appropriate. And there's no scientific way to establish that. I think you can just use some common sense and see if where they're kind of dividing up the residential versus the non-residential, if that makes sense. So that language was added since our discussion last month. Most of the other languages we kind of looked at, and the staff is recommending approval of Ordinance 22-04 through Resolution PC-22-04.
Any questions or comments on this? Then do I have a motion?
I move for approval.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Move on to item number 13, discussion and public hearing on a request to amend the Farragut Municipal Code Appendix A, Zoning Chapter 3, Section 26, Plan Commercial Development, PCD, to clarify that uses permitted in the general commercial or office zoning districts may, rather than shall, be permitted as part of a development plan submitted for the rezoning request for PCD, Town of Farragut applicant.
This is another zoning ordinance amendment. This one basically involves the planned commercial development district, and currently any use allowed in C1 general commercial or office O is allowed in the PCD. It said the word is shall. So what we're doing in Ordinance 22-05 is basically changing that word shall to may, so that the uses that are envisioned would be really looked at as part of the concept plan that someone would present as part of the rezoning request through PCD. So it doesn't really bind the Planning Commission to kind of have to allow any uses in C1 or office. It's really puts more weight back on the development plan, the concept plan that is actually part of the rezoning to this particular district. So that's the minor change in Ordinance 22-05, and the staff recommends approval through Resolution PC-22-05.
Again, any questions or comments? If not, I'll have a
Move to
motion.
approve.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Item number 14, discussion and public hearing on a public tree care ordinance that will be required to help meet one of the standards for the application for Tree City USA recognition, Town of Farragut applicant.
We also talked about this last month. We are in the process of getting ready to apply to be a Tree City USA. There's 4 criteria that I reviewed last month. One of those is developing a tree care ordinance. Really, this is an ordinance that deals with trees on public property, really, or in walking trail easements that the town has responsibility for maintenance. So this would satisfy that requirement, and embedded in this ordinance is also the establishment of the tree board and some of their general responsibilities, including working on and helping with an Arbor Day proclamation and observance. So this is a pretty straightforward ordinance. It would establish really a lot of the town staff as being tree board members that deal with public properties like Public Works and engineering and parks and recreation, and we hopefully have a little some good standards to go by and to look at when different activities are proposed that involve trees on public properties or greenways. So the staff has prepared Ordinance 22-02 to create the public tree care ordinance. I actually created a new section in the municipal code. It was the easiest way that I could think of to do it. And we are recommending approval of Ordinance 22-02 through Resolution PC-22-02, approval of the public tree care ordinance.
Any questions or comments about this?
I have just one, and it's just grammatical.
Okay.
Under Tree Board 1, membership, G, member at large with background in tree care who is a citizen of the town, not that.
Okay.
That's it. That's all I had.
Okay, I got it.
And we might be in violation the next time we have to go prune those Bradford pears out front. So one of these days, we just need to cut them down and let's plant new trees
Well,
in there.
one of the things I acknowledge that in here is that a better approach may be, and this also can occur on rights of ways or under overhead utility lines. If people just end up topping them, then we probably ought to just take them out at some point, and if we're going to add something back, make sure it's appropriate for the location.
Well, like how many times we had to prune, Public Works had to prune these Bradford pears, and eventually,
They need to go anyway.
but we need to go ahead and get rid of them.
Horrible
I know I'm
trees.
getting off topic. We need to go and get rid of them, and let's plant something, so at least in my lifetime, I'll be able to enjoy it.
They may go tonight, you never know.
Well, yeah, that's right. Hopefully nobody parked under one.
Yeah. Should have
May
thought
have
about
some
that
car
before,
damage.
before now. It might have happened. I tell you what, in my neighborhood, I don't think there are any Bradford pears left because they've
all broken.
They've all
Yeah.
broken and come down. The only place we still have them is in the entrance. And other than that, they've come down on people's houses and cars.
They like that carbon monoxide, don't they?
I'm going to move for approval.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, item number 15, discussion on including a subdivision regulations, a requirement for a concept plan and preliminary plat to show locations for centralized mail delivery as governed by the U.S. Postal Service, and this is for discussion purposes only.
Yeah, this is a topic that we brought up, staff brought up in February of 2019, actually. Shortly after we became aware of this requirement. So basically, new subdivisions and, more importantly, new phases in older subdivisions, which has been kind of the potential issue, are required to establish centralized mail delivery systems that have to be approved and then verified by the U.S. Postal Service before they'll deliver mail. So all we're trying to do here is look for ways to put in our requirements in our subdivision regulations, some reminder essentially under both the concept plan and preliminary plat sections that applicants and staff need to remember that we've got to be thinking about this and where does these facilities need to go and logically should go, not just with new developments, because we really haven't had any issues with those, but we have had a couple of phases that we didn't even think about at the time. One of them was before 2019. So we never thought about having them designate that. And so now after the fact, there's some people that are having issues getting their mail delivered. So that's not a good thing. So we're just trying to build some systems of checks and balances.
Trying to codify what we've already been practicing, but we're just.
And it kind of is worded, the draft language is worded to basically defer to the post office or any amendments that may occur in the future. Because there could be some things that may change in the future, you never know. So if it does, we don't have to go back and amend our ordinance again. So just kind of building some flexibility in there.
Yeah.
So that's all this is about. If you all are okay with that, I can put that in a resolution next month and bring that through.
Looks good to me.
Yep, same here.
Move to approve.
We're not.
Not voting. Just
Discussion.
move along.
Okay. 16, approval of utilities. Utilities. Citizens forum. Is there anyone here that to speak on something that's not on the agenda?
Adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. So the February 17th, 2022 meeting of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission is adjourned.